They invaded her land. They enslaved her people. But one African queen rose from the ashes and united kingdoms to fight back. This is not a legend. This is the real story they never wanted you to know. When the colonial powers cast their gaze upon Africa, they saw kings and warriors. They saw men they could manipulate, corrupt, or crush. But they were blind to the true bedrock of these societies, the silent force holding them together. They completely, fatally overlooked the women. Imagine the scene. You walk into a room heavy with the fate of your people. The Portuguese governor is perched on a massive, ornate throne of arrogance. For you, he has offered nothing but a woven mat on the cold floor. It is a calculated act of humiliation, a declaration of power. But the woman at the center of this story does not flinch. She does not bow. She gives a silent command, and one of her attendants kneels, becoming a living throne of loyalty and defiance. She sits, meeting the governor's gaze, not as a subject, but as his absolute equal. This singular act of defiance was only the first shot in a war of wills. This woman was Queen Nzinga Mbande, and she would unite rival tribes, forge a nation for liberated slaves, and wage one of the longest, most successful campaigns of resistance in history. In the late 1500s, the land we now call Angola was a vibrant, volatile tapestry of kingdoms. At its heart lay the kingdom of Ndongo, home to the Mbundu people. But a shadow was falling across the land, a shadow cast by Portuguese sails. Fueled by an insatiable hunger for enslaved people to feed the sugar plantations of Brazil, they were no longer traders. They were invaders, driven to dominate the region and seize control of the horrific slave trade. This is the world into which Nzinga was born, around 1583, an age of brutal chaos and escalating violence. She was a king's daughter, but from her first breath, she was different. While other noble women were sheltered from the levers of power, Nzinga's father saw the fire in her eyes and the steel in her spirit. He brought her into his war councils, let her witness the administration of justice, and had her trained in military tactics. An education reserved exclusively for men. She learned to wield a battle axe, and more devastatingly, she mastered the language of her enemy, becoming fluent in Portuguese. This upbringing forged her into a leader who understood the brutal calculus of politics, diplomacy, and war. And every one of those skills was about to be pushed to its absolute limit. By 1622, the situation in Ndongo was catastrophic. Nzinga's brother, the king, presided over a realm collapsing under relentless Portuguese assaults. Thousands of his people had been dragged away in chains. In a final, desperate gambit, he turned to the one person with the nerve to face the Portuguese lion in its den, his sister, Nzinga. He sent her to Luanda to negotiate a peace treaty. What happened next became the stuff of legend. When Nzinga entered the negotiation room, the governor sat enthroned, offering her only a mat on the floor. It was a clear message: you are inferior. But Nzinga would not be diminished. In a stunning display of sovereign power, she signaled to her attendant, who knelt to become a human throne for her queen. Nzinga sat down, locking eyes with the governor, an equal. That one move reset the balance of power. She was not a conquered subject. She was a queen. Speaking his own language with flawless precision, Nzinga brilliantly dismantled his arguments, demanding her people's freedom and her kingdom's right to exist. She secured the peace treaty and, in a shrewd diplomatic flourish, agreed to be baptized, taking the name Dona Ana de Sousa. It was a virtuoso performance, halting the Portuguese war machine, not with armies, but with pure, indomitable will. But a peace built on lies is a foundation of sand. The Portuguese betrayed the treaty, and the raids resumed. Nzinga's brother, broken by failure, died. And in 1624, Nzinga seized the throne of Ndongo. Her right to rule was immediately attacked. Her own nobles, steeped in tradition, refused to follow a woman. The Portuguese exploited the dissent, backing a puppet ruler to wage a civil war. By 1626, they declared war on Nzinga herself, forcing her into exile. She was a queen without a kingdom, a leader without a land. For most, this would have been the end. But for Nzinga, it was a transformation. Forced into the wilderness, she reforged her strategy. The old ways were not enough. To defeat an empire, she had to become something new. She made an unthinkable move. She journeyed to the Mbangale, a society of ferocious nomadic warriors who were the sworn enemies of her people, and she forged an alliance. She adopted their rights and mastered their ruthless methods of warfare. This was more than a pact. It was a reinvention. She was building a new power base from the ashes of defeat, fusing her royal legitimacy with the terrifying military might of the Mbangala. Her army was no longer just Mbundu. It was a hybrid force, remade in her image, adaptable, resilient, and fiercely loyal to her alone. With her remade army, Nzinga was ready to carve out a new destiny. Between 1631 and 1635, she marched on the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. It was a masterstroke. Matamba had a tradition of female rulers, giving Nzinga the legitimacy she had been denied. After conquering it, she established her new capital, a fortress deep in the interior, far beyond the immediate reach of the Portuguese. Matamba was now the heart of the resistance, and Nzinga was its undisputed queen. From this stronghold, she began her life's great work, uniting the shattered peoples of the region against their common oppressor. Her vision was revolutionary. She declared Matamba a free state, a sanctuary for all who defied the Portuguese. She offered freedom to runaway slaves, brilliantly turning the engine of the colonial economy into a weapon against it. She even persuaded Portuguese-trained African soldiers to desert, offering them land and purpose in her new nation. Her kingdom became a crucible of resistance. A multi-ethnic state of Mbundu, Mbangala, freed slaves and military defectors, all bound together by loyalty to their queen and a shared hunger for freedom. She proved that ancient rivalries could be burned away in the face of a greater threat. She wasn't just leading an alliance, she was forging a new society in the midst of an anti-colonial war, led by a queen who understood that true power is forged in unity, not division. This is the kind of history that empowers us. If this story of unyielding strength resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and become part of a community dedicated to unearthing the legacies that define us. Now let's continue. For the next 3 decades, Nzinga waged a war of fire and shadow. She was no distant monarch. She was a warrior queen, often leading her armies into the fray herself, her hands familiar with the weight of an axe and the maps of the battlefield. She perfected the art of guerrilla warfare, using her intimate knowledge of the terrain to devastating effect. Her armies moved like ghosts through the tall grass, striking like vipers at Portuguese supply lines, bleeding their resources and their morale. But her genius extended beyond the battlefield. She was a master diplomat, playing global powers against each other. When the Dutch fleet appeared as a rival to Portugal, Nzinga saw her chance. In 1641, she forged an alliance with them, one of the first African-European coalitions against a colonial power. With Dutch arms and her strategy, her forces crushed a Portuguese army in 1647 and laid siege to their colonial capital. For a time, she reclaimed nearly all of her ancestral lands. Even when the Dutch were defeated and withdrew, Nzinga fought on. She continued to disrupt Portuguese trade routes and incite rebellion in their territories, relentlessly combining fierce raids with cunning negotiations to keep them perpetually off balance. Her long, brutal, brilliant war proved she was one of the most formidable opponents any European empire ever faced in Africa. Queen Nzinga Mbande died in 1663. She was 80 years old. She did not die in exile or in chains. She died on a throne, the powerful and respected ruler of an independent kingdom that had defied one of Europe's mightiest empires for over a generation. In 1657, after decades of war, she had signed a final peace treaty with Portugal. It was not a surrender. It was a pact between equals, one that recognized her sovereignty and guaranteed Matamba's independence. Her legacy is monumental. She took a situation of utter desperation and forged a powerful, unified resistance. She built a nation from scattered peoples, giving them sanctuary and a common cause. She demolished the gender roles of her time, proving a woman could be a master of statecraft, diplomacy, and war. So powerful was her example that the tradition of female leadership in Matamba continued for generations. Today, Nzinga is revered as the Mother of Angola. She is a national hero, a symbol of unbreakable defiance, and a towering reminder that history is filled with titans we have been taught to forget. Her story doesn't just correct the colonial narrative, it reveals a history of brilliant, strategic, and relentless African resistance. She didn't just fight a war, she forged a nation and built a legacy of unity that still inspires those who fight for freedom today. The story of Queen Nzinga Mbande proves that history's greatest titans are often hidden in the shadows, their stories waiting to be brought into the light. Her genius was not just in her tactics, but in her profound ability to see a path to unity where all others saw only division. Whose forgotten story needs to be told next? Name a leader in the comments below. And to discover more incredible stories of the men and women who fought to build a better world, make sure you subscribe and activate the notification bell. Thank you for watching.